Hi, everyone. Welcome to Career Bootcamp 2024, Communicate for Success, Mastering Skills for Credibility and Career Growth. I would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which I'm speaking from is on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. They have lived on this land since time immemorial, and I encourage you all to acknowledge the land that you're on as well. Career Bootcamp is the largest conference in the GC, and the only goal is to support you in your career journey. As we move through today's session, please share your questions by using the Q&A button in the language of your choice. You can vote for questions you like by clicking on the thumbs up button. Please ensure as much as possible that your questions are related to the topic of today's discussion. If you're looking for answers on additional topics, you can find resources, including links to session recordings and podcasts on the Fin wiki page under resources. As with all Fin sessions, this session will be recorded so you can go back to check out the recordings and the insights at a later date. In addition to the recordings on our YouTube channel, we are also offering another way to learn this year, a podcast series of the Career Bootcamp sessions. After CBC, the podcast will be made available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We would also like to note that the PowerPoint presentations for each session is included on our wiki page, so that you can feel free to follow along at your own rate and to improve your learning experience. Also, all the resources shared today during the session will be added to our wiki page under resources. And you can see that the instructions are on the page. Please make a note of it. And with that, I want to introduce myself. Hi, everyone. My name is Justin Lai. I will be your moderator for this session. I'm a person of Asian descent with short black hair, wearing a striped blue with white color t-shirt, sitting in a brightly lit room with the Career Bootcamp 2024 logo as my background. So I joined the public sector in 2021 as a citizen services officer. I'm currently with Jordan's principal at Indigenous Services Canada, meeting Indigenous children's medical needs. And I've had the opportunity to work on diversity and inclusion work at the Center of Expertise of Diversity and Inclusion under the ADMO last year. I went on one of my dream trips last year, and I look forward to another one coming up this year. So for today's sessions, we're going to go over the learning objectives. First one being learn how to adapt to your communication, to engage others and boost your career. Discover the power of clear and credible communication to advance in your professional journey. Unlock the secrets of body language and nonverbal cues to build strong connections and grow your career. Lastly, understanding how building rapport with senior professionals can open doors for career development and growth. So before we get started, we have a couple of quick polling questions. This is not a test and it's not mandatory. The first question is, how often do you consider your audience's preferences when communicating in your professional life? The options are always, often, occasionally, rarely, or never. And with the second question, which of the following factors do you believe is the most important when adapting your communication for different audience types? Choices are language and tone, media and communication channels, visuals and design, message structure, or I'm not sure. And we'll give a couple of minutes here to populate the answers. Okay, so we got the answers. They're in now. We have 23% sitting at always, 50% with often, 19% at occasionally, and rarely at 7%. That's for the first question. And for the second question, we have language and tone sitting at 67%, media and communication channels at 7%, visuals and design at 7%, message structure at 13%, and I'm not sure at 5%. Thank you everyone for participating. Now I would like to welcome and introduce our panelists. We are fortunate to have them with us today. We have Lucy Ellis, who is a speechwriter at the Privy Council Office. She has a decade of public service excellence, spanning 4 different departments and a variety of fields within communications. Over to you, Lucy.
Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here today. So for those of you who are joining for the audio, I am a brunette woman with glasses and a sort of butter yellow and black shirt. I started my career in the beautiful days when Twitter was still called Twitter and had a 140 character limit. And I've since worked in digital communications, speech writing for the Chief of the Defense Staff, which was one of my career highlights, and now at Privy Council Office. So really excited to talk about communication and happy to get into it. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Lucy. Next, we have Sudipta Roy Chaudhary, who works at the Canada Revenue Agency as a manager of communications in the Human Resources branch. Sudipta is an avid traveler, passionate foodie, and a serial reader of books of all genres. I'll pass it to you, Sudipta.
Thank you, Justin. For a visual description, I'm a person of South Asian descent from India with long dark hair. Today, I'm wearing a blue jacket with white pinstripes and my favorite large pearl earrings that are a sentimental gift from my mother. So I was born and raised in India, moved to the United States in my teens and to Canada in my early 20s. So that was a long time ago. I have a love for business communications and marketing since my student days. I have a bachelor's in business communications and an MBA as well. Currently, though, I'm pursuing my Master of Laws at U of T, so a bit of a different, but forever a student. My career so far has been in the field of hospitality, working with global hotel chain leaders, and since 2021 with the public service. So along the way, I've learned from some incredible mentors and peers, and today I'm excited to share my journey and to be able to discuss communications with everybody. Thank you, Justin. Back over to you.
Thank you, Sudipta, and I will pass it over to Justine Reynolds, who currently holds the position of Senior Advisor with the Federal Youth Network and has joined the FIN team on secondment from Infrastructure Canada. She joined the public service 11 years ago, originally as a co-op student through the University of Ottawa. She has worked in a number of federal government departments, including the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, the Canadian Coast Guard, Correctional Services Canada, and Statistics Canada. I'll leave it to you, Justine.
Hello, everyone. I'm Justine Reynolds. Very nice to be with you all today. I'm a white Caucasian woman, a little bit taller than average. Today, I'm wearing a dark green shirt with a collar, and I have blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail. I also have the Career Bootcamp background on in the background, and excited to be with you all today. As Justin mentioned, I do have recent experience working in the Minister's Office at Infrastructure Canada, which was a very challenging but rewarding job. I'm now working on an absolute dream team with the Federal Youth Network and excited to be part of Career Bootcamp from many different angles this year. I also am the co-chair of the Mentorship Community of Practice with my good colleague, Emily Smith, where we lead the interdepartmental collaboration of anything going on with mentorship in the GC. So if anyone wants to reach out and discuss mentorship, I'm always available to do so. I just wanted to mention that although my role is not specifically with comms, I truly believe that comms is the foundation of everything. So even if you here today don't have a specific role in comms, I'm sure you can all relate with us that comms is in everything and is so important for everything. So I do not call myself a comms expert, but but I'm happy to be with you here today to discuss and learn together. Thanks, Justin.
Thank you, Justine. And with that, let's get started on the topic. I'll pass it off to Lucy.
Perfect. So Justine really set me up to start where communication is an integral part of our personal and professional lives, not just, the big C communication of news releases and social media. Communication is everything, every day. It's how we relate to each other. And to be effective, you need to be deliberate. So start with asking yourself 2 questions. 1, what is my goal? And 2, who is my audience? So imagine for a second that you work in information management. You're a SharePoint whiz, you're building sites for teams in human resources, legal, and finance. Your goal is to build good SharePoint sites that follow best practices and policies. You want to impress your manager with your technological and client service skills. But if you go into a meeting with a narrow focus just on your goal and your perspective, and you only talk about policy compliance, do you think that you'll be successful in getting the other teams on board with a collaborative project? Maybe not. You have to think about what they want. What do they need? What are their pressure points? What obstacles might they be nervous about? So maybe finance wants powerful dashboards, HR is concerned with information security, legal wants to make sure that historical information isn't lost. They're all worried that this is going to be a big effort. To succeed, you need to understand and address their concerns, and you need to bring them along on the journey with you so that they can see the positive opportunities. So where do you find this information about your audience? Start by asking questions to your team members, your manager, or even the target audience members themselves. Question and challenge your own assumptions and any unconscious biases you might have. Look up previous research or existing information from other projects. Most importantly, listen. Communication is a 2-way street. Next slide, please. So now that you know who you're communicating with, you need to adapt so that you can effectively reach them. Adapting communication is something that we do all the time. So think about the last time you told a work story to a friend. You probably dramatized vivid language, slang, inside jokes, big hand gestures, expressive face. You varied the pitch of your voice to really hook them in. Now, think about the last time that you told a work story in an interview. You could have told the exact same story in a completely different way. In an interview, your goal is to persuade the panel, your audience, that you meet the job criteria. With your friends, your goal is to entertain. Different goal, different audience. So in an interview, you still have that energy and passion, but your language and tone would be more formal. Your hand gestures would probably be more reserved, your posture more upright. You would focus on facts and outcomes and explain background context as required. You probably do this intuitively to a certain extent, but communication is a skill. It's a skill for everyone to practice. So when you come across different situations, try to be more deliberate about how you communicate. Your director absolutely does not have time to read a 5-page analysis of every issue. So put the bottom line up front. Use bullets, subheadings, and clear formatting so that they can scan the text and find the most important information. If you're talking to someone from another department, avoid acronyms or jargon that they might not be familiar with. Be concise in team meetings. Provide updates that are valuable for your manager and your team members, and do not just read off a list of every single thing that you have going on. If you're presenting complex data, consider making a graphic so that your audience has a reference, and then explain it to them. And when you're writing an email, make your subject line really clear. For director approval by 3 p.m. on Wednesday, clerk speech for agriculture meeting. Or for awareness, background on SharePoint migration project. There are a million examples. So just remember this. You will be the most effective when you adapt your communication to meet the needs of your audience. Thank you so much. And now over to Justine for establishing credibility.
Thanks, Lucy. Great job. I'm sure some of that was helpful in preparing for today. It really was for me too. And it was super fun doing some research, learning more about communications. So now we're going to talk a bit more about how you establish credibility through evidence-based communication. It's all about what you say and how you say it. We've all heard common sayings like, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it. That one was funny for me when I read that, because my mom used to always say that to us. So basically things like that, quotes like that are suggesting, think about what you're going to say before you say it. Always important, always good to remember. So lately, we really need to think outside the box with communication, because a lot of communication these days is in various fashions. It's not just through letters or speaking to each other face to face, right? We have a lot of different ways of communicating, whether it's social media, texts, MS Teams, so on and so forth. Effective communication is key in getting our message across and in building relationships, in addition to connecting with others. Given that so much communication is over text or instant messages and so on, like I just said, it's really important to think about what you're typing or what you're saying before you say it to make sure that people really resonate and understand your message. So let's talk a bit more about what you say. So the words. So if you see the graph on the screen, it shows that about 55% is up to physiology, 7% is words, and then voice or tone is 38%. So it's really interesting that only 7% of what we say matters in terms of the text. Like, what are we actually saying? The rest is the way you're moving, the way you're talking, and so on. So for words, what you say, establish credibility through evidence-based communication. Do your research, provide sources, but don't take credit for others' work. Always make sure to cite your sources. Acknowledge what you don't know. It's totally okay. If you're in a conversation, you don't know the answer, you're not sure about something, that's fine. We're all human. You can acknowledge that you're not sure or that you'll get back to them as well. It makes people more vulnerable when you say you don't know something, but it also allows us to be more human and connected to each other. So let's talk a little bit about how you say it. So physiology, your voice and tone. A couple tips to share. Be confident in your findings. This can be made apparent through your body language and tone. So if you're in an interview, like Lucy was saying, try and make sure you feel confident about your responses and be assured that what you're saying is accurate. So we couldn't talk about evidence-based communication without sharing some stats. So research shows that 90% of communication is nonverbal. That's a lot. That means that only 10% approximately is left up to spoken words. This means that there can be a lot of info not conveyed when people don't see nonverbal communication. So if you're reading a speech online that a politician gave, you're not seeing their mannerisms, the way they're talking and their tone. So that means potentially a lot of information could be lost in the message. In the other sense, nonverbal communication can tell us things that aren't necessarily mentioned in the verbal words. So someone's feelings about a certain topic, if I do a certain face or make a certain expression, it can tell us a lot about the message without the words. So pretty interesting. The power of body language. So a lot of this goes to first impressions. Research shows that when we meet people for the first time, we make quick judgments about their friendliness, assertiveness, and appearance without a single word being said. This isn't very fair to judge someone at first appearance, but unfortunately, we all do it to some degree. So according to the 55-38-7 formula, nearly 40% of a person's attitude is conveyed vocally through tone and inflection. So it's a good practice to try and ensure that your tone matches whatever the message is you're trying to convey. A couple other quick tips. A smile and eye contact can go a long way. Oftentimes it's a little bit different when you're in person. So much of our world is virtual lately, but still good things to keep in mind. Research has shown that it takes conscious effort for a person to frown when looking at someone who's smiling. A smile is literally infectious. So a smile can be just the right, just the right amount of eye contact can go a long way with first impressions and conveying your information to someone. Hand gestures that Lucy touched on are also a big one that provides us with a lot of info about someone's message and can show that you're interacting well with them. Can also show us a lot about someone's emotional condition. If they have their hands crossed or are leaning back, it can tell us a lot about how they're feeling at that time. One more quick thing is nodding, especially we found in virtual context. If you're nodding while you're muted, it shows that you're listening along, as opposed to looking down at your phone, texting someone, or working in the background. It's a polite way to show that you're listening by just nodding. Okay, moving on to persuasion. Won't take too much more time. Why is persuasion important to consider when it comes to communication? It's important to discuss and to think about because we want people to believe and trust the things that we're saying. Aristotle lived about 2,350 years ago, and yet his theory of rhetoric and persuasion is still relevant and applicable today. Research shows that to persuade someone, you need all three of the following that are listed on the PowerPoint presentation. So appeal to character, appeal to emotion, and appeal to logic. So appealing to character, people are most likely to listen to you if they have trust and confidence in your character. Presenting yourself as professional, reliable, and authentic are all essential to successful communication. Ultimately, you need to be authentic to who you are to build trust with people. Build connections through your words and your body language. Be calm and confident as you deliver information. Be as genuine as possible. Ask about their day, how they're doing. Build that relationship with them. Remember details about people. Listen attentively. Always important to listen. And all these things will help establish your credibility and your character. So appealing to emotion, which is the next one. Your communication should speak to the emotions at the heart of whatever you're talking about. Put things in terms that people can relate to and understand. So plain language. And use storytelling to get to the human side of things. And lastly, appeal to logic. So back up whatever you're saying with data, evidence, and facts as much as you can. Numbers can tell a really powerful story. You just need to communicate them clearly, put them in the right context to make your point. Make sure you can say where you got your information from. So that's it for persuasion. So overall, as you can see so far, comms is in everything we do, no matter what your role is in the GC. It's really the foundation of everything and the foundation of all our relationships. So we'll be able to share some more tips and tricks after, but for now, I'll pass it over to you, Sudipta.
Thank you, Justine, and thank you, Lucy. It's so great to be able to revisit, we do this day in and out, but it's so great to be able to revisit the foundations of what communications is all about. As we started our session and Justin ran the poll, I'm just so excited to see that 73% of you, so 50% occasionally and 23% always consider your audience. If there's one thing you can take back from today, that's probably it. And it looks like there's a lot of focus on that already, because who we're speaking to, and sometimes that is a variety, and that in itself is an entity of audience is key. My role today is to be able to discuss communications in the realm of relationships and rapport building. The most important part as we get into this, and relationships always, when we think about it, we think about the other person. And actually, bear with me a moment. I'm going to put a timer for myself because I have been known to talk all day. So thank you. All right. So when we talk about relationships and rapport, we're always thinking about another person, right? Somebody you're building this with. What I want to challenge you with is to first have that with yourself. So to be a good communicator, the first thing you want to see is your story, who you are, what are your values, what is your brand, so as to say. So key before you start venturing in making connections with people, I encourage you to make that connection with yourself. And it isn't okay, I've done this in the beginning of my career, and it's a weekly or a daily or a monthly or perhaps an annual check that you want to do for yourself. It's helped me do that tremendously in my career as I've grown and evolved. It's really helped me to check in with myself. Who am I? What do I believe in? Have my beliefs changed? And to quote Maya Angelou, like when you know better, you do better. And so it's a great opportunity for each of us to check within ourselves and know our strengths, our weaknesses, areas we want to grow in. That said, For many of us, building that connection with the next level, it's easy sometimes, or it's easy perhaps with your peers, or with people who are in your team, but how to grow that upwards towards your leaders, managers, perhaps leaders and managers of sections and divisions or organizations that are not even the ones that you're working in. And again, I would say 3 things that you want to start with, and there's a lot of bullets in there on the slide, all are relevant. I give you 3 things to start with first, which is the first part is active listening. Lucy mentioned this in her presentation as well. When we're looking to build a connection with somebody, building that rapport, let's listen, which means when they're speaking, let's not, already start formulating responses in our minds. And this is not only when we're dealing with issues, but even just when we're having a conversation. Somebody's talking about their vacation. Am I already thinking about, oh, let me talk about my vacation and how great that was? So let's really listen in, because that is a key part of communication, is actually listening to what the other person is saying and picking up on those cues, which is then what you can use to build that bridge, to have that connection, right? And so for that, you really just need to be able to indulge yourself in active listening. The second part I would say, as you are looking at building relationships and building rapport with managers and leaders, is your own story, and pay attention to theirs. It's the most effective way of communication. We're human beings, and no matter how much we rely on data, and data-driven decisions is a big catchphrase these days. At the end of the day, we're all people with hearts and souls, and we connect to each other as such. So think about your stories, pay attention to what theirs are, and build those connections so that you can lean into that when you are trying to engage in building that relationship with each other. And my third point I would say is to get to a position where you can be a trusted colleague, and I say this from a communications perspective, not like everybody has to have their secrets and confide in you, but from a communications perspective, that you have, and both Justine and Lucy spoke to this, but the credibility part, right? So when you are engaging and when you are discussing whether it's a strategy or whether it's your feedback, that it comes from a place that is based on facts and relies on information that can be, the metrics can be measured. What that gives you is that sense of trust that the decisions are sound. They are coming from a place that has been evaluated and measured. And so I see I've gone over my time limit. So I would say finally to wrap that up in terms of building the relationship, trust yourself. Trust yourself to be confident in reaching out to people you may not know, to have conversations with people you may or may not know about things that you may not think is to talk about the promotion, for example, to talk about the mentorship. Are you looking to ask someone to be your mentor? Our initial instincts for all of this is to resist, right? Because we're scared of rejection. And so really ask yourself, what is the worst that can happen? It's probably going to be, they're not going to agree to something that you're forwarding as a proposal. They're not going to agree to be your mentor. They're too busy. That's the worst that can happen. So please encourage yourself to go out of the box and engage in conversations that might be difficult or challenging, just because as human beings, to go outside of our comfort zone is hard. But you know what? It gets easier the more you do it. I think we talked about how Lucy mentioned how it's a practice and how you can get to become a better communicator. And a lot of it is just practice. So I hope that you all keep practicing and keep trying. The value that you provide when your communication skills are enhanced is it goes through all fields. You don't have to be in communications. It doesn't matter what you do. It enhances your overall value to your organization, to your teams. So with that, I will pass it back on to Justin.
Thank you, panelists, for sharing such relevant points and each of your own personal wisdom. That was awesome. We'll now move on to questions from the audience, of which you may use the Q&A function. Please remember that you can vote for the questions you like by using the thumbs up. And with that, let's get straight into it. I'll ask the question, one panelist will answer, the others are free to add in their thoughts as well. The most upvoted question at the moment is, what are some common mistakes you've observed? Once again. Okay, what are some of the common mistakes you've observed that can damage credibility? I'll pass that over to Justine to start.
Sure, great question. So a couple things come to mind. Being professional is super important, and we're assuming that we're talking in a more of a work context here, right? Like we could go on a whole other tangent about personal relationships and whatnot, but because we're in a work setting, we'll focus on work context. So being professional is very important to establish your credibility and to establish your character, right? So that goes hand in hand with like what you're wearing. You want to make sure you're dressed appropriately. So this, obviously with experience, we learn things, and something came to mind where there was someone who was just not dressed appropriately for a work setting. And there was deputy ministers and other important people. We're all important, but there was senior leaders there. So that's something that I would say as a tip, make sure that you're always presenting professionally. Another thing would be the way you say things. So make sure you're not using any vulgar words or saying anything inappropriate. Just make sure you know who your audience is. And in a work setting, we should never be talking as we would to our best friend on the weekend or something, right? So just make sure you're not using any inappropriate language and remaining professional with the way you look, the way you present yourself, and the way you're talking. I would say those are two quick tips to answer that. Something else that actually comes to mind is not just the way you're presenting in person, but online too, right? Because everything is about social media these days. So make sure to keep in mind how you're presenting yourself on social media. So damaging credibility could easily be done through social media. Sometimes it's a good suggestion to have a professional page and a personal page. That way you can feel free to post whatever you want, share pictures from your weekend or from your trips, whatever it may be, but make sure to remain professional when you're posting online on your LinkedIn or for professional purposes. We've seen some people unfortunately damage their credibility by posting open opinions or whatnot, whatever it may be, online for everyone to see. And we need to take into account how that could be perceived. Maybe you're not intending to come across a wrong way, but it could be. So just keep in mind what you're posting on social media.
If I could add on to those excellent points, be careful about what you put in emails. If you're feeling spicy, you're feeling some kind of way, breathe, relax, do not put it in an email, take a moment, take a step back, because bad emails can and will come back to haunt you. Same with Teams messages, and double, triple check that you are writing the right chat in the right message. Also, if you make a mistake, just own up to it. One of the worst things that you can possibly do is to make a mistake and then lie about it or hide it or like sit on it and hope that it will go away. Like, I have done this before. I have made a mistake. I realized it. I immediately went to my manager. I explained what happened and I explained to her how I was going to fix it. So own up and say how you're going to fix it. Those are my two main things.
Yeah, what great answers. I hope everyone got some of that wisdom from that. And moving on to the next question, building rapport with senior professionals is a key theme of this workshop. Can you provide some guidance on initiating those relationships? And we'll start with Sudeepta on this one.
I love that one because I think that I have personally used it and continue to do so. So thank you for that question. this is the part where you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? And I'll give you some specific examples on how I have approached this. We're all different personalities, so you'll have to adapt this to what works best for you, because as in communication, the most important part is being authentic. In terms of senior management, keep your eyes open, or your ears, or like, don't let an opportunity go. For example, in my work, as in all your workings, you would come across sometimes that you're liaising with senior officials who are not necessarily part of your everyday work, but perhaps there was a presentation and they were there. Perhaps you had to brief them on something. So don't lose any opportunity. And again, I don't mean that do it every single time, but if you sense an opportunity and you will get that from the leader as well, don't lose the opportunity to connect. So that may be in that particular forum or in that particular setting, being that active listener. Right? It's not always about talking or leaving that impression, but you could hear. So for example, way back when I was in, I suppose we can't name hotel chains, but with one of them, one of the senior leaders was jogging in the morning as I go for a run in the mornings. And, as we ended, I just mentioned, oh, I always have a Diet Coke for breakfast and I wonder where I can get one. It was just an off comment, and we were at the end of a beach in a conference in a hotel session. Anyways, a year after, they came to Toronto, and having been promoted to a very senior role globally with this company, came to Toronto and stayed at the hotel I was working in downtown. And guess what was available for them for breakfast? The Diet Coke, even though that chain favors Pepsi, was available for them with a note from me. And they remembered it. They didn't remember me, but they remembered they remembered that this had happened. And I actually sent a note to the hotel manager to see if I was available for a quick chat. I didn't think this would happen. I was just actively listening. And when I had the opportunity where I saw in the list that this person's visiting us, I took that chance and did something outside my comfort zone, which is reach out with a note and something that I know that they were hopefully still having for breakfast. By the way, Diet Coke for breakfast is probably not a good idea. I'm not promoting it. So all to say, well, I'll give you another example in public service. I was preparing a senior leader for a briefing for something actually that they were going to be a panelist for. And the conversation went into hockey that I really don't know very much about, but I do know a little bit about the food and drink. I enjoy it myself. And so they mentioned about hockey and how they would not get good food or drink options. And we were, it was just a conversation about that led to a conversation about restaurants in town. And through that, I was able to build a bit of a personal connection and a bit of a mutual, because as I mentioned before, we go beyond our jobs and our roles. And so to be able to take these connections and build that is great. And I followed it up with a LinkedIn invite and a list of my top 3 restaurants. And I've had the luxury of traveling a lot with my previous roles in global hotel chains. So it was a way of continuing that conversation, right? So we had the briefing, and then I sent an invite with the top 3 in restaurants in the city I knew they were going to be traveling to, and it's just continued. So we continue to share, top restaurant choices, and they don't have to be Michelin stars or anything, but just good food, right? And we've continued that conversation. When an opportunity comes up in their brunch, I sort of may have got a call. So just continue the conversation, keep engaging, and do it in a way that you're comfortable with. Above all, be authentic. So hopefully that answers the question, and I can talk about it all day, so I will be quiet now.
I would just add to that don't hesitate to reach out to senior leadership if they're involved in mentorship programs. So we have a list of mentors on our Living Library page. So Haley or someone on our team is going to share that in the chat if they haven't already, but check out some of the mentorship resources that are available. There's also speed mentoring sessions that you can get a part of, participate in. So good ways to make a connection, and then you can always build the relationship from there. Ask them later if they're willing to have another coffee chat. But a good way to break the ice through the existing mentorship programs.
Yeah, what great tips. I mean, focusing on the little details, right? And then remembering and then to action them. I think that speaks volumes. With that, I'll move on to the next question. I feel like I know what I need to do and that I communicate well in writing, but I get nervous and panic when communicating verbally. Any tips? And I'll pass that over to Justine to start.
Sure. Yeah. So I think we all experience this sometimes. We're certainly not perfect, and we can always improve no matter who we are. So definitely relate to you on that one. Something that I do when I feel nervous is literally breathing. And this helps with like anxiety anytime or anything. So try that. Just take some deep breaths, do box breathing. If you're really nervous, it really helps. If you're delivering a presentation, you could try listening to some fun music, your favorite song before. I know that wouldn't work necessarily walking up to someone in the hallway. You don't want to be blasting music, but before a presentation or before a speaking engagement or anything, try listening to one of your favorite songs and it'll help you calm down a bit.
Yeah, I definitely. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Sandeepta.
Sorry, I was just going to add to what Justine had just mentioned. I find that for me, a great tip is to be prepared and to practice. I've been doing these for over 25 years now, in terms of public speaking, and I will share that you still get butterflies, at the beginning of, so it doesn't matter how long you're doing it. Sometimes it looks like, oh, this person is so calm and composed, but a lot of that comes from a lot of practice and a lot of preparation. So don't skimp on that.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment, those two answers are such great ones because it resonates with me. I know I've definitely hyped up myself with some music before I enter such stressful situations or to make those connections. It really does help. And of course, to visualize it too, as Sandeepta said, because it comes with practice, right? If you visualize how the conversation is going to go, your mind is focused and you're actively listening. And with that, I'll move on to the next question. What are some simple strategies I can start using today to adapt my communication for different audiences, especially in a professional setting? And I'll pass that over to Lucy to start.
Great. So think about the goal of the person that you're communicating with, and then sort of try and adapt your communication to how you can make your goals and their goals align. So if you're proposing a new idea to your manager has to think about financial and human resources. They have to think about how their team's work fits into the bigger picture of the organization. They have to think about the workload for their team, all of these different things. So if you can approach that conversation and come up with your proposal, and you've already sort of answered or thought about some of the things that they might raise, then you're going to have a much more productive conversation with them. So it's about sort of kind of empathy building. It's putting yourself in somebody else's shoes and thinking, what does this person already know? What do they already believe? What do I want them to know? What do I want them to believe? And what do I want them to do? And how can you bridge that gap and sort of bring those two worlds together? So really put some time into thinking about the other person's perspective and how you can kind of bring them along the journey with you.
Yeah, no, about building that rapport, right? Going back to relationships, having that structure to form the meeting around. I mean, that's just effective communication right there. Moving on to the next question. How do you politely and diplomatically express an opinion when you strongly disagree with something? I'll maybe perhaps pass that to Sandeepta to start.
Absolutely. Agreeing with someone seems very seems very easy in comparison to when you might have to disagree. And again, going back to our human nature, right? Also our own personality type. Some of us may be perfectly fine with conflict, or some of us may avoid it, anything but get into the confrontational part, what you think is confrontational part. So the specific, I want to give you some, let's go with the top 3 tips that I would do, and hopefully that will resonate with you. The first thing would be to somehow separate the emotion from it. And that's hard to do, because depending on the topic, we're all passionate about things. We're all purposeful about, items that we're engaging with. But in this case, it's not necessarily just empathy, but even like what is, I think, technically called compassionate communication, where you are separating out the emotion, but you are seeing the perspective of the other person, really understanding. So if we are disagreeing, let's understand completely what they are saying, and is that what we're disagreeing with, or are there outliers, or are there any externalities that are making us feel that way? That's the first step, just deep breath and just understanding what is it. The second, and I can't say this enough, is respectful communication. Knowing that each one of us has a certain set of values, and from that's where our communication is originating from. Sometimes when we are communicating our disagreement, we are inevitably disagreeing with perhaps somebody's values. So we're not even talking about the upper layer, but just think about the layers underneath that communication. So let's always be cognizant of when we're raising our objections, let's do it respectfully in a way that's cognizant of all the different layers that may be behind whatever the opinion or the idea or the strategy the other person would have proposed. So that would be my second point. And my third point would be, when you're communicating your disagreement, be open to listening why that may or may not resonate with the other person. Be open. So when we're expecting other people to be open to our disagreements, let's be open to their disagreement to our opinion. Because I really believe somewhere along that is the best path forward between agreements and disagreements, and active listening and compassionate communication. There is a path for a best for all. It may not always seem at the time, but give yourself permission to open up your mind to other people disagreeing with you as well. That would be it for me, Justin.
If I could build on what Sudipta was saying there, I think it's really important to to speak truth and to raise your opinions, your perspectives, your concerns, but also recognize that sometimes a decision maker is going to make a different decision. And sometimes they're going to do that because they have other contexts that you're not aware of, their other priorities, whatever it may be. Your job is to sort of come up with the best recommendation, approach, proposal, way of doing the thing that you can, and sort of provide that advice or do that work. But also, like, sometimes you need to check your ego and accept that a decision might go in a different way. So for me, when I'm writing speeches, I can write the most beautiful, amazing speech in the entire world, and then I submit it to the clerk's office and they say, oh, we don't want that. Like, that's not what we're looking for. And that is okay. That is their prerogative. And I might disagree with them on that, but then it's my job to then go back and change the speech and fix it. So there's coming to terms with disagreement and being okay with it and not taking it personally, I think is something that is really important to grow as you move your careers along, because there will be disagreements, but like Sudipta said, you can manage those disagreements in a respectful, collaborative, and constructive way.
Yeah, no, I feel like all of these answers have been so wonderful. I think what's worthwhile to recall is what Sudipta said earlier, to sit in that uncomfortableness, to get comfortable in that discomfort, right? Because we don't always want to stir the pot, if we will. And with that, I'll move on to the next question. Do you have any advice for neurodivergent employees who might communicate differently than their teammates? Ooh, this is a very tough question. Does anyone want to try to tackle this?
I could try. Unless there's anybody else, I didn't, okay. So I want to go back to I hold this quote dear by Maya Angelou, and I didn't quote it verbatim, but when we know better, we should do better. For neurodivergent employees in our organizations, we're still learning so much, right? We haven't necessarily explored completely how the most effective way of communicating in a way that suits their needs. We haven't gone there. We haven't done that work yet. We've started it, which is the good news, but we haven't reached there to a point where perhaps we may have explored for some other areas. So why I wanted to take this on is because not everything has a perfect answer. I think we are always sometimes at this point where we don't know everything, but we owe it to ourselves. We owe it to ourselves to educate ourselves. We owe it to our colleagues to be respectful and to address and communicate in a way that works for them. So this, so I raise my hand to answer, but it's not because I have the answer. But what I want to share with this point is sometimes we don't always have the perfect answer. We're still learning, we're evolving, and we just need to, there are some highlights, of course, when we are doing, for example, pardon me, like when does a phone ring when you're talking about this? I apologize, my gosh. We know some things about sort of, not having bright colors in infographics, for example. I'm just picking on that one example, to be able to make it more accessible and more of a efficient way of communicating with our neurodivergent colleagues. So just to make sure that that is taken care of, and just using one example. But my overall point is, we don't always have the answers, but it doesn't stop us from constantly exploring, learning, speak with people who have the lived experience, and ask them, and not for just the sake of asking, but for the sake of learning and for growing. We can all improve, so we all need to continue to do that. If anybody else wants to add in, please do. I raise my hand not because I'm an expert, but because I wanted to say that we need to constantly keep learning.
Yeah, maybe just a couple of small things. So like one of my good friends, she is autistic, and for her, eye contact is very uncomfortable. So she will look at sort of the bridge of someone's nose. So it kind of simulates eye contact without, for her, experiencing the discomfort. So sort of finding adaptations for yourself. And I think also for everyone to recognize that for like different cultures, eye contact isn't sort of, not all cultures experience or understand eye contact in the same way. So also, if you're making eye contact with someone and you can see that they are uncomfortable with it, like break the eye contact, look at something else, don't like hold someone's gaze. Finding sort of strategies for yourself about how you organize information before you go into a meeting. So whether that's like color coding or like different lists, so that you can organize it in the way that is going to make sense for you to feel better prepared before going into a conversation. I also really want to empower people to have those open conversations with your managers. So if for you, communication will be more effective if you receive feedback via email versus a Teams call, or in person, or camera on, camera off. If there are accommodations that your manager can make to better facilitate communication for you, I really want to encourage you to have those open communication and open conversations with your manager, so that you can all be on the best wavelength with each other.
Yeah, oh my goodness. All of you provided such great answers today. I know I learned a lot today and will definitely review the recording on the Fin YouTube page or to check out the podcast series the next time I have questions about this topic. If you want to know more about any of these topics, check out the CBC 2024 Wiki resource page. To provide a quick recap, today we learned about how to adapt your communication to engage others and boost your career. Discover the new power of clear and credible communication to advance in your professional journey. Unlock the secrets of body language and nonverbal cues to build strong connections and grow your career. And finally, understanding how building rapport with senior professionals can open doors for career development and growth. The Fin will be hosting in-person learning days across the country. Be sure to register early to guarantee your spot, as these sessions will sell out. Information including how to register and which cities will be hosting events can be found on the Fin Learning Hub. We have one final polling question. The results from the poll will not be shared. So the question is, was this session a good use of your time? Choices are yes, no, or I don't know. Great, thank you so much for answering. Thank you all for joining us today. In addition to this afternoon's sessions, we will be discussing the key digital skills you need to succeed as a new public servant at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. There's also an opportunity to drop into the kiosk and speak with members of the GC communities from 3:30 to 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. There's also, and if you're wondering how to navigate the expo floor and kiosk booths, please go to the expo tab in the lobby menu, and then you'll enter the expo floor. From there, you can move your avatar to enter booths. Inside the booth, you will be able to see a description of the GC community and a logo. You will also see a meeting space that is a Zoom meeting that a representative from a GC community is hosting. You can then enter that meeting to ask the representative questions, press the blue button, join, and you'll be put into the Zoom meeting. And with this, the link to all the sessions as well as the networking event can be found on the Zoom events main page. Resources will also be available on the wiki page, and the recording of this event will be available on our YouTube channel afterwards. And with that, this concludes our session. Thank you so much, everyone.